press it.
Right, I think we're pretty much all here. We were misplaced someone, haven't we? He'll be here. So we make a start as we have now reached 2 o'clock. We are live streaming, so if I can just give you a quick explanation of the technology. In front of you, you have a speaker bar, for want of a better word. There is a button in the middle. If you're asked to speak, you press your button. When you finish speaking, if you switch it off, I'm told that will apparently be really, really helpful. So good afternoon to you all, and thank you all for attending. As we're live streaming, it's probably worth going around the table so that people can understand who's sat here. So I'm Councillor Alison Gwynn, I'm chair of this committee, and I'm representing Tameside Council.
I'm Gwyn Williams, I'm the Deputy Monitoring Officer for the CA.
Yeah, my name's Paul Harris, I'm from Governance and Scrutiny over at the CA.
Hi, I'm Mohammed Iqbal, Councillor for Bolton.
Councillor Abnar Akbar, Manchester City Council.
Kingsbury Council. Stephen Hewitt, Oldham Council.
Judith Lloyd, Trafford Council.
Councillor Roy Driver, representing Stockport Council.
Councillor Helen Foster-Grime from Stockport Council.
Sean Anstey from Trafford Council.
Stuart Hassan from Bolton Council.
Pat Rogers, Waste and Resources.
Justin Lomax, Waste and Resources.
Michelle Whitfield from the Waste and Resources team.
Sarah Malla from the Waste and Resources team.
David Taylor from the Waste and Resources team at Gmca.
Okay, so we should do well as long as I remember to turn the speaker on when I'm speaking, because that will happen, so you have to give me a kick. Okay, so do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, Councillor Garrido from Salford.
Okay. Fantastic. So moving on, I've not been notified of any urgent business, so there has been an apology from Councillor Garrido, but he is a new appointment to this panel, so that was ratified on the 27th of July by the Gmca. Item 4 is declarations of interest. If I can ask Gwyn to take that item.
Yes, members, just a couple of reminders from me, please. First of all, to complete your registers of interest in relation to this committee. They're identical to the registers you have in your own districts, but if you want some advice, please don't hesitate to ask. And the other matter is in relation to the confidentiality of Part B papers. We're coming to a very sensitive part of the procurement process. We want to maintain the integrity of it, avoid any challenges. So please keep those papers confidential. And if you want us to dispose of any papers you've finished with, please just ask, and myself and Paul can do that for you.
Thank you very much for that. Item 5 is minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy to accept those as a correct as a correct record of the meeting that we attended on the 12th of July? Yes? Okay, thank you. All happy with that? Okay, brilliant. Moving on to the other page. Committee work programme is item 6, and David's going to take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is setting out the proposed work programme. This is a dynamic document, so it will be reviewed prior to each meeting and updated. Next meeting is due for November, and in particular just to draw your attention to proposals around budget and levy setting process, and also the communication and behavioural change delivery plan on that particular meeting.
Did anyone have any questions? Okay, if not, are we all happy to note that report? Yes? Content? Fabulous. Item 7 is register of Gmca key decisions, and David will take us through that.
Again, this is a document which is updated regularly as any new key decisions are identified. In particular, for those coming up, it will be around the budget and levy for next year, and the communications behavioural change delivery plan. That will be a key decision of the committee, which we'll be looking at in the November meeting.
Okay, any questions on that report? No? Are we happy to note that? Yes? Fabulous. Item number 8 is plastic-free GM, and Sarah will be taking us through that.
Thank you. This report sets out the work which has been done today on the Plastics Free campaign. The Mayor launched this campaign at the Green Summit in March. It initially set off, but it was going to be just tourist and hospitality, but the momentum and the engagement of Greater Manchester to get on board with this campaign has been very significant. As such, the report sets out that we now have 7 currently work streams, and it tells you what the next steps, what's happened and what the next steps are in each of those, as well as ask for an additional work stream which looks at lobbying government so that we can look at ways that we can reduce those polymers and get some action within there, so increasing costs of plastic bags, working towards getting Greater Manchester plastic free. Also within the report it sets out proposed governance arrangements, so already in existence there's a steering group which looks with the leads of each of those work streams, and then it's just requesting that an additional board be set up so that it has some accountability from both a political level as well. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Quinn. Is anyone else wanting to express it? Okay, so.
I read the report. It might be a bit cruel of me to say. I thought it was concentrating on it's plastic straw, plastic straw, plastic straw, and I think reading through it, it's what it came over to me, and I think I pulled something off, and plastic straws are about 0.3 of 1% of the plastic. So the question I'm asking is we need to be obviously chasing other forms of plastic, but we have asked the Michael Gove. We've submitted evidence of part of his consultation on a deposit return scheme. So have they got back to us? And I was at recycling, because probably I'm the anorak on the committee. I was at Recycling Waste yesterday at Birmingham, and the first time I've seen a deposit reverse vending machine. And what obviously the rep track promoter, he was saying they're going to be working with Tesco and other supermarkets. We exchanged cards. I said, well, it would be great if you could get working with Tesco in the GM area, because that would be fantastic if we could. I like Recycling for Greater Manchester, because Tesco are one of the big supermarkets. If they were sticking a machine outside one of their stores and encouraging people to do that, I know in the future it would affect, if we went ahead with it full steam, it would affect our income stream, as people won't be putting it in the commingle bin. But have we heard anything back from Gove about going ahead with the deposit return scheme?
I can assure you that it isn't about a plastic straw. It's just that was the platform which the Mayor launched the start of the campaign. We are looking at addressing all single-use avoidable plastics. Work which we're doing with universities very much on a grand level, looking at getting them totally plastic free and having a blueprint campus which can be rolled out. The work which we're doing with local authorities is to look at getting procurement frameworks in place so that we can eradicate all those things. So it's not, I suppose we have to start somewhere, and that's just been the platform in which it started from. In terms of the deposit return scheme, it is one of the options which is under consideration. There's been a study done by University of Cambridge recently, which was commissioned by the government to look at that and the feasibility of that. It is in the mix still. There's probably some concern whether or not that will generate enough income for what we need to do in order to drive out the other elements of the waste strategy, which is hopefully coming out from government by, was going to be October. We think now it's more likely to be November. So yeah, there's a lot of things doing, but we are constantly speaking to government about the deposit return scheme, just to make sure.
My question is regarding businesses, businesses within GM. It's good to see that a number of businesses have already, particularly supermarkets, are already working on plastic-free initiatives. What initiative are we taking to coordinate some of that activity and get more voluntary involvement of the businesses in Greater Manchester?
So you see from the report, one of the work streams is volunteers, and we're working very closely with, at the moment, with organisations like Friends of the Earth to get a volunteer scheme. We're also working with the Growth Company and the access which they have to be able to tap into their resources as well, so that we can reach this as much as possible. We have quite a strong database now of companies which have contacted us through the launch of the Green Summit, wanting to work with us to try and move this agenda forward. So small steps, but we are making, there's traction there. I think that will only get greater.
That's great, but are we publishing the list of firms which will volunteer to get involved? Because I think it'd be useful for us to know which ones are and which ones we need to question whether they would get involved.
So part of what we're doing on the work streams is communications. A big part of that is the website. If anybody's looked at his current website, it's lacking. So we have commissioned a piece of work which is looking at the website. A part of that will be case studies promoting organisations which have taken a step. It will look at who is pledging. We need to make sure that with the new GDPR rules, but we've got organisations signed up. So as part of the launch of that website, we will be making sure that all the organisations who we know on board are signed up, A, to the website, and B, that we can use their information to actually publicise their pledge.
Okay, is there any further questions?
Thank you. It's about the role of the individual local authorities in the use of the single plastic. Is it just up to the local authorities to develop their own procedures, individual procedures for reducing it, or can the combined authority give them any recommendations or guidance on how to do so? Thank you.
So there's a two-strand approach which we have with local authorities at the moment. One is through the Sustainability Environment Group, which are looking at this, and also then the procurement group. So we are collectively looking at this. So if we can develop a procurement framework, we can drive down costs and make those changes. But what we need to do is make sure that anything which we're moving to, that it has the right carbon footprint, it has those right environment, because we don't want to be in a situation that people feel they're doing the right thing, they think it's recyclable, but actually it's causing us problems from a disposal perspective. So it's highly complicated, but we do have the will of the local authorities to drive this agenda forward as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Was there anyone else? If not, I would ask that you note the work undertaken to date, approve the inclusion of any additional work stream of lobbying government regarding national policy for eliminating avoidable single-use plastic waste, approve that the residents element of the campaign be incorporated into the Waste and Resources Communication Delivery Plan for 2019-20, and to endorse the governance arrangements set out in section 12 of the report. So if we're all happy to do that, I see some of you nodding. Yes? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. We shall move on to item 9, which is Waste and Resources Communications and Behavioural Change Action Plan progress to date, and that's Michelle.
Thanks. Good afternoon, councillors. I've got a couple of slides to go through that will just highlight some of the things in the report. The first one is to talk about the campaigns. So the blanket campaigns across the 5 districts regarding contamination is underway. We've procured a leaflet delivery company, LDM, and worked up a schedule of delivery across those 5 districts for the leaflets to go out. So that's underway. These are probably slightly subject to change depending on weather, and also it's quite a large scale campaign. We're delivering 500,000 households, so those dates might change for a week or so either side. The bin stickers have been produced as well, and they will be delivered to each local authority, and each local authority are taking the responsibility to deliver them out themselves. And then we've also been undertaking some events, some community events, and I've brought a copy of the general leaflet that we've produced, and I've got some that you can take away at the end of this, and this is going down really well. We've not referred to bin colours so that we can use this across the district, across Greater Manchester, and we've had very, very good feedback about this, the leaflet. The next steps in the campaigns is to start looking at package delivery collection points, so things like this one from Amazon. We want to try and put some advertising, some point of sale on these types of places to remind people to recycle their cardboard boxes and to empty them before they recycle them. We're also looking at supermarkets to put some advertising on supermarket shelves to remind people that you can't recycle pots, tubs and trays in Greater Manchester, and that they should go on your general waste bin. So in the report, it just shows a picture there of the current advert that's gone out in the Manchester Evening News, and all of these are the local papers. I've got a few stats from the Manchester Evening News from the previous campaign that was about cardboard box recycling. That just shows the number of impressions. Alongside the newspaper adverts, we've also got a package that includes a lot of digital advertising. So one of the advertising is the advertising on the Manchester Evening News website, which is like it's called a skin that goes on around the outside of the website. So for the last month, we had 400,000 impressions, and impressions means residents had an opportunity to see this. And the number of click-throughs onto our website was nearly 2,000. We tried something called Pinstream, which is geo-targeted advertising, which pushes adverts out onto people's mobile phones. And we had this as part of this package, but it wasn't very successful. The figures are quite low, so we've dropped this type of advertising from the next advert and the next package. So we are using the data that we're getting back from Manchester Evening News and NewsQuest to kind of tweak and tailor these advertising packages as we go through the year. The next thing we're moving on to is some bus and tram advertising. This is an example of one of the adverts that you'll start to see across bus stops. So the dates up there, where we're starting in September and October to do street liners and bus advertising. We're also doing some adverts on Metrolink tram stops, and also at bus shelters and a few of the council information points as well. That's the end of the slides. The other thing I wanted to just point out was that we've had the meetings now with the councillors and the SOG representatives to discuss what they'd like to see in the next communications plan for next year. And as David said, that the communications plan will be presented at the next Waste Committee in November. So I'm about to sit down with the comms team now and draw on the summary that I've put in the report, to use that to pull together the communications plan for next year, and then that will be presented in the next Waste Committee on the 15th of November for approval. Are there any questions? No questions at all? Okay.
It was a comprehensive and self-explanatory report, so
That's good.
I think that it's a good thing. There's no questions. It was leaving no doubt there, I think. Okay.
So the training day you did, which was excellent, as those who attended appreciated that information and the chance to do input. A bit disappointed we haven't got feedback from some of the recommendations we made and having to wait for the next meeting. But nevertheless, that's what we've done.
I provided a summary, so I've summarised all of the points. Yeah. So what I'll do now is I'll use all of your suggestions to draw together the communications plan. So I've not actually started to sit down and do that yet. So I'll do that with the communications team, and we'll look at the budget we've spent, and the work we've done so far, and use this information to write the communications plan for next year.
Probably agree. We don't feel we're using the local authorities as much as we possibly could with some of the publicity material. We were unaware, for instance, I was unaware that the stickers were going on the bins. It was only when you told us about the stickers on the bins that I was able to do it. So it's an audit of what you're doing and making sure it's getting to the people concerned, which concerns me.
We have done some councillors' briefing notes about the campaigns, and they've gone out, with pictures of the stickers and the leaflets and the dates. But yeah, I'll take your point that we need to keep you regularly updated as to what we're doing.
Thanks, Chair. You know, the sticker for the individual bins, how about the communal bin, which, because the area I represent, we got a large area which is covered by the communal bins. So will there be this sticker for them as well? And also, sorry, in regard to the campaign, are you targeting the local schools as well? You know, that'll be the best one, I think. Like you said, you know, the bus stops and tram station, that's a good idea as well, but the local schools?
Yep, I'll take your point about the stickers. Communal bins are not included as part of this campaign. We're just focusing on households for the moment. So the bin stickers have been designed for the 240 litre bins and will be stuck on by the bin crew. Schools, yes, we're including the schools as part of this campaign and encouraging them to come and visit the education centre, or we'll come out to them. So yeah, we are sending newsletters out to the schools, and we'll be talking to the City Council as well to ask them to promote what we can offer as well to the schools. So yes, definitely. We haven't got flats on our communications plan for this. Do you mean flats where we have communal bins?
No, I mean, the terrace properties in my ward, as well as the other part of Manchester, they got communal bin in the back alleys. So.
Yeah, sorry, I understand now. I'll talk to Manchester City Council about that to make sure we can include those as well.
Councillor Quinn.
Sorry, I had to pop out as leader of the council. What does worry me is I don't think anything's been resolved with China yet, and where I'm coming from is if we don't get a replacement for the Chinese market, then we might be sending out a different message. Like, don't put this. You might have separate papers, more paper going in the residual bin, and we're already in Bury. We're on 3 weekly collection. That could give us more of a problem, as in, you know, the bins are full. And also, it's a sheer confusion around plastics. And all of that is down to the manufacturers. They put a little triangle on the bottom, and people say, "Oh, you can recycle that," and I say, "No, well, what can you recycle?" And so we say, "Well, just bottles." And it's getting that message across, and that consistent message. And it does worry me that if we do go to PAMS, papers, leaflets, magazines, if we go down that, well, what happens with the other contaminated card? And how do you get a message across to what's happening in China? I know it's not our fault, but it's what we're left with, and it's getting a consistent message over to the people. And so I can imagine it being confusing for a lot of people.
If I can come back to the point around paper and card and Chinese markets under the Part B agenda on the procurement report.
I'll take your question about plastics though. We are focused on plastics in Oldham and Tameside just for this year, because we found in those areas contamination is worse in terms of the pots, tubs and trays in the recycling bin. But we are doing a lot more work around that in general because we're finding there's general confusion across Greater Manchester. So we're doing a lot more on our website, a lot more frequently asked questions. And also we got asked by the BBC to speak to them about Recycle Week, which is next week, and they're putting some information out about pots, tubs and trays and asked me to speak about the campaign. So we are hoping to get that message out, and I think it's about consistency and keeping the momentum going. So that will form part of the communications plan for next year as well. We've got to keep on with that message. But yeah, it's a good point, and it's a big part of the campaign at the moment is around contamination in the bins.
Is there any further questions? No, if not, are we happy to note the progress made against the plan and to improve the focused aims for the 2019-2020 plan? If we're all content with that, yeah, fantastic. Moving on to item 10, which is asset management update, and David will take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is providing an overview of the assets which are within the Waste and Resources team portfolio. Now, these aren't the operational waste sites. These are a number of closed landfill sites, 4 of which the waste team looks after. We've got a number of buildings within the portfolio, one at Hurstwood Court in Bolton, the existing office in Oldham, and then we also have a range of land holdings. So the report is giving you an overview of each of those assets, and the asset management plan at the end summarises the actions for this year. I think two sites to draw your attention to in particular. We have land at Nash Road in Trafford Park, which is adjacent to the IVC, and the report refers to feasibility study looking at some of the options that may be available to us on that site, one of which could be to relocate the gas engines from one of the MBT plants onto that facility, and you can then use those engines to create electricity to export during peak power demand periods and generate an income. So that's one possibility for us. Alternatively, we can also look at a solar farm on that site, similar to the one at Overhalton, again to generate some income. So that's being looked at. And the other site in there to draw your attention to is Dunkirk Farm. So this is a parcel of land adjacent to one of the landfill sites that we've sold on to POS Landcare, and that site has got a number of buildings on it, which the proposal is that we will be demolishing those from a safety grounds. It's a fairly remote area. There is some behaviour that goes on there, which having buildings there, it's not safe, so those will be demolished, and we're also looking at the options of what we do with that parcel of land. Now that we're part of Gmca, they do have a centralised asset management team, and longer term the intention will be for all of these assets to be managed centrally. That way they're part of a specialist portfolio, and it also relieves some of the pressure on the engineering team to focus their resources where they're more needed, which is around engineering. So that's the longer term plan. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Driver.
Yeah, referring to Appendix A, Item 7, Bredbury. You notice the work there, the infrastructure and drainage improvements has been delayed. Have you any indication about what the new timescale is for that work to be done?
The feasibility studies on that will be completed in this financial year, and the work itself will be next financial year.
I was watching a television programme last week on solar farms, and they were using them in the south on old landfill sites. I was conscious of the landfill sites which we owned and transferred to another person, another body. And we actually consulted with them to see if there's any possibilities putting landfill solar farms on those sites.
Well, the 18 sites that we transferred, they're now under the ownership of POS Landcare, so ultimately it would be their decision as to what they chose to develop on those sites. They do provide us each year with a development report which sets out the options that they're considering for the various sites. I would suggest that what we look to do is bring a report back to you for the November committee meeting, which gives you an overview of the management plan, how we monitor that, and also where they have actually undertaken any developments on the former sites. The answer to that is before we did anything, there'd be a full feasibility assessment looking at power outputs. They are still viable.
We must have some indication from the Salford.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the Salford plant is generating an income for us, and it will continue to do so.
Thanks, Chair. Two things on the solar farm. We have one on the disused runway where I work, and then it's performed at 25% with this wonderful summer we had, above expectation. The engineers on site are telling me that the payback, I think it's a 5 to 7 year payback, which is a really good return on investment. And secondly, on the methane burners, myself and Tony went to the Highview power station next to the landfill at Pilsworth, where very quickly they suck in air, freeze it, mostly nitrogen, into a liquid, and then when Coronation Street adverts come on, when you need that boost of electricity, they then send it through a process where the liquid becomes a gas, it expands quickly. They use the methane burners to agitate, to warm it up so it expands and gets more agitated. That goes through a turbine, produces electricity, and it's something like they can power 3,000 ohms for 6 hours. That technology is, a lot of it is from the oil and gas industry. It's off-the-shelf stuff. It was funded by a government. It's proven. Now they say, it's there. We know it works, and they're looking to build a site 10 times bigger. So I don't know if it could. Yeah, obviously, we don't know if it'll ever be in Manchester, but that technology is out there, and it was using our methane burners to be part of that. So it's quite nice to visit. So thanks.
Okay. Is there any further questions? If not, we shall push on to the recommendation is to note the updated report and the asset list and the associated actions intended for the remainder of this financial year. If you're all content with that? Yes? Happy? Right, okay. Moving on to item 11, which is update on procurement of Gmca waste services.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is providing an overview of the procurement process. There is an accompanying Part B report which goes into more detail around the outcome of the draft tender stage. So by way of a reminder, we are in a procurement process at the moment which started in November 2017. It's on the basis of 3 lots rather than a single integrated contract, and the 3 lots are set out in paragraph 1.5. The aim of the procurement process is to deliver a set of strategic objectives which are set out paragraph 2 in the report, which essentially is to increase landfill diversion, increase recycling, specifically from the household waste recycling centres, and for those 3 contracts collectively to get us to over 90% diversion from landfill and 55% recycling and composting. All of those objectives have been developed with previous members of the Waste Disposal Authority and also with the district chief officers, and they form the basis of the specifications for the procurement process which is underway at the moment. So, excuse me, as far as the timetable is concerned, that's set out in section 3. So starting from March 2017, we went through a period of soft market testing. We published the OJU notice in November 2017, and then we arrived at a point in December of that year where we'd shortlisted down to a number of organisations who were eventually invited to participate in dialogue, which commenced in April of this year. So the shortlisted organisations are set out at paragraph 3.7 against each of the lots. And where we've been subsequently is through an issue of an invitation to tender. So this is a draft tender stage where the tenderers were then providing us with their technical solutions, financial models, legal markups, with no down selection at that stage. All of that documentation came back to us in July of this year and has been through a full evaluation process, which I'll talk more about in the Part B process. And where we are now is the start of the next phase of dialogue, and that will lead up to the issue of the final tender documents, and that's on this programme in front of you is due in October of this year, and we will then move through a process of evaluation and then contract award. I think that's as much as I want to say on this report. It's very much an overview of the process to give you comfort that we're following an OJEU compliance procurement process. It sets out the advisors that we've used and the process that we're going through. And then when we get into Part B, we can talk in more detail.
Okay, thank you. Has anyone got any questions on this specific part of the report in this section of the meeting? Councillor Anstey.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. So just 2 points, really. One is the extent to which the procurement process is responding to a changing policy environment. So what we're procuring is going to be fit for future. So that's something that I think it would just be useful to hear your comments on that, David. And then secondly, at some point in the future, there'll need to be an articulation of what the potential benefits for householders across Greater Manchester can be. And present thinking around that, I think, would be useful to explore as well.
So on the first point, you're absolutely right. We're at the point where we're waiting for the National Waste Strategy to be produced. At the moment, we don't know exactly whether that will reflect the EU circular economy and whether we will be tied into the longer term targets within that document, which are 2025 and 2030 and increasing recycling rates. Because of that uncertainty, what we've opted for is the contract term to be shorter. So it's 7 years with an option for a 3-year extension, and then there's a further option of a 5-year extension. And it's been deliberately kept short so that way it gives you, firstly, the ability that a lot of these changes will come in post-2025. So that's at the back end of the contract term. And then if anything is to be introduced earlier than that, then the contract change mechanism is where we will deal with that if anything happened during the term. On the second point around contract communications, once we've selected a preferred bidder, we'll then be into a mobilisation period with them, and part of that will be agreeing a communications plan about what will happen at various sites, how the services will improve, and how we go about communicating that with residents.
If there's no further questions, I would ask that we note the progress made against the procurement program in this part of the report. Yes? Okay, thank you. So item 12 is the interim services contract update.
Thank you, Chair. This report considers an overview of the performance of the interim or run-off contract, as it's referred to. It is holding the services in between the end of the PFI and the new procured contract to be. This report takes in figures up to the end of July, and we'll compare them to the previous year position to give you an idea of where we are in progress. Section 2 shows you those figures. In summary, the year to date shows an overall slight reduction in arisings overall total. Small increases in recycling from the WCA collections and at the HWRCs. Which gives us an overall recycling rate of almost 48%. Diversion has been affected by the absence of the Bolton TRF plants after the fire that happened last September and the remedial work that's had to go on since then. But that has been offset by the feed for refuse-derived fuel to the Runcorn facility. So some of that material that would have gone through Bolton has been sent down to Runcorn. So that has allowed us to get a slight increase in diversion still without Bolton to almost 89%. In that time, waste to landfill year on year fell, and about 9,000 tonnes difference there, so that was good. It also shows you the recyclate contamination levels, which unfortunately still remain quite high at greater than 17%. They have fallen slightly, but they're still quite high. With the increased focus on the outlet markets that we've heard about, the rejections of upfront loads of WCA delivered loads has increased. It's been about 340 tonnes of of material delivered that has unfortunately been rejected at the MRF. Other items to mention on the operational side there, the IVC we have at Nash Road in Trafford Park suffered the loss of the odour control system fan. Basically the fan that extracts the air from inside the facility and treats it to remove the odours. That problem occurred on the 7th of August, and in getting that repaired and back to service, the plant had to be closed to receive the reception of waste, unfortunately, which displaced loads from Salford and Trafford MBCs to neighbouring IBC in that time. The facility was repaired and returned to service on the 21st of August. Down at section 3, you'll see the year-to-date figures for the health and safety information for the contract. There were 47 reported accidents, but fortunately no RIDDORs were reported in that period. Also down at section 4 there you'll see the complaints. Of particular note, I suppose July was the highest number of complaints for the year to date. Those complaints centred around odour. The report points out where and how the complaints were responded to. None of them have been substantiated at the time as being a problem from one of the sites. All the complaints were handled and closed in line with the complaints policy. I'll happy to take any questions on any of those areas.
Okay, I've got Councillor Haslam.
Thank you. It's just about the Bolton, on 2.4, about the Bolton facility. It's been reported that, you know, there's had 6 days of downtime in July. Are the problems all completely finished on that?
I'm afraid not. No, they aren't at this moment. When you start up a facility like that, it's not unusual for there to be continued downtime. Unfortunately, no, that there has been further issues that with the refractory line and with the boiler tubes have led to increased downtime. Following that, we have an issue at this moment that the site is down, and we are trying to find out how quickly and how much more progress can be made on getting that back into operation.
That is quite worrying, obviously, you know. And the other question is, I mean, you said that some had been diverted, the landfill had been diverted to the Runcorn facility.
The material that would have gone to
the
thermal recovery, yes.
Is there any guesstimate of how much that has impacted on our recycling rate, with the Bolton site being out of operation?
As far as the Bolton site being out, that would have influenced our diversion rates as opposed to recycling. Sending it to Runcorn is effectively the same type of diversion to thermal recovery. So in that sense, it is looking, if you looked at these percentage figures and said, how's our diversion? Well, fortunately, it's been the contingency has managed to pick up and even improve slightly on last year's position. So there's been no damage in that sense. However, use of the Runcorn facility is more expensive to us than the use of the TRF at Bolton. So in that sense, it's more of an economic disadvantage than it is of the environmental. Diversion hasn't suffered, fortunately.
Just, you know, the contamination in the coal mingle, how much of that might be the wrong type of plastic is what we talked about earlier, people putting tubs and trays in that. And the second one is on health and safety. What constitutes a near miss? Because looking at the figures there, it seems to be we're getting a lot of near misses on site.
Yes. So in the first question, yeah, the plastics do feature. Yes, certainly. That too much of the wrong type of material could get a rejection, or equally at the other end of the MRF, when the MRF it separates by exception. So what is left at the end is material that the MRF isn't designed to collect. So that could quite easily, the pots, tubs and trays issue of should we say, inaccurate recycling would certainly feature quite significantly in that. That said, however, there are a wide range of other materials, including metals and the likes, that are still the wrong type of material for our facility. Taking on your second question on the near misses, yeah, really that's been a deliberate focus of the health and safety policy, is to encourage near miss recycling. So if an accident hasn't occurred but a hazardous event has been seen, then they're encouraged very actively to make sure that is reported. So really seeing the near misses go up is a good thing in that sense, in that as long as the accidents are then either going down or staying no worse. then that means the regime is more alert, there's more awareness on site and people are bothering to report things. So everything from seeing a brush lay on a walkway to pick that up and put it to one side, you know, people may not report that, but it could go in as a near miss and it should. So I think really what we're seeing is a product of awareness and the correct policies being used on site. Exactly, yeah.
Thanks very much. Just in 2.7 on the Trafford Park extraction fan
Yes.
issue. So the report sort of indicates that it suffered significant corrosion damage and it was discovered, which sort of suggests that it was just found. So I suppose it's just an assurance around the maintenance of how we look after plants, so that we don't see it.
Absolutely,
after it's
yes.
happened.
To give a brief explanation, the fan sits within a cone so it can create the vortex to suck the air through. Where the ducting meets that cone housing, the type of couplings that have been used were mild steel and were more of a rivet than they should have been a bolt, a stainless steel bolt. What happened was the corrosion of those rivets meant that the cone fell forward and stopped the fan. So they arrived. So
dissimilar metals.
yes, basically they arrived on the site to find the fan wasn't extracting. So the results, as you rightly say, was a maintenance review, and the first thing they did was went all around all 4 facilities and checked the couplings, and where they weren't stainless steel bolts, they went in and replaced them with them as a consequence.
Chair, could I, for the benefit, if you put 2 metals together that aren't near each other in the periodic table, you get a slight electrical charge, and that means one's robbing the other. So if you put aluminium and steel together, the aluminium will rot the steel, so that's what you get. It's probably been fitted poorly, if I'm being honest. So if you get dissimilar metals, you will get corrosion, and once that corrodes, that's what's happened.
Effectively, the weight of the fan has driven it down.
It was just about making sure that we'd done the check and that.
I think just to reassure you, as Justin said, because that fan is housed inside something, it's taken failure to be able to detect the problem, and now it's been detected, all the others have been inspected.
And that will stay on an ongoing regime of inspection.
Okay, is any further questions? Okay, no. So we're being asked to just note that report if everyone's content to do that. Yes, fantastic. Thank you for that. So we're at item 13, which is exclusion of the press and public, and also to ask that we pause the live streaming so we can move to part B of the meeting. You can just confirm to me when that is done. What you've got to do? Flick a switch or turn the power off.